building on any overlap between what we care about and what we're interested in and what we value. So I'm intrigued by the skills and conditions and dispositions and circumstances that are both kind of forcing us to do that and that might support us in doing that. And one of the primary things I think you and I talked about is song circles and the chance to sing together, to join voices, and the vibrational impact of co-regulating with sound, and finding a place in the larger, the larger choir of nature. So anytime I get a chance to sing with others, that really supports this project of finding our place in the whole.
Mm, mm. I love it. I love it. And when we first connected very recently, and I reached out to you because I quote your work in my book, your method, your agent target rank framework, which is a very um, commonly used framework in the fields of liberation and equity work. When I reached out to you and I learned that you use song so directly, song and creativity so directly in your work, I was very moved. And in fact, we did some singing and you shared some song with me during our first meeting. And oh, there's your cat. Hey, kitty. But yeah, you used some song making and you talked about song making, which really touched me because as an artist, as somebody who loves music in my kind of personal life and is looking more directly to bring singing into my facilitation work, into my cultural change work. I love how you bring song as this kind of body's way of knowing directly into your work. And I think it's such a powerful way to access liberation from the body, which is our vehicle for experiencing and changing everything, whether it's past, present, or future. So it's very, very inspiring to me that you do that. And my first real question for you to really kind of deep into these concepts is, for those on our call who might not be familiar with the concepts of agent and target rank within your framework. My question for you is like, how do these dynamics, well, first of all, can you explain what these dynamics are in a simple way for our listeners who might not know? And then can you share how these dynamics translate to the body?
Okay. So the framework is a shape that could be compared to maybe an apple. Um, in the core of the apple, in the center are the seeds, and I've termed that power, and that is not social power over, but source, power with, um, aspects of empowerment, personal power, spiritual power, collective power, those kinds of things, generational power, resource. That lives in the seeds part, and then the meat of the apple is what I've termed rank, and these are the assignments, the social assignments that we receive. So my suggestion is that our identity is not in the meat of the apple, but in the seeds. And part of what lives there is our response to our experiences, including our response to the assignments that we are given. And these social assignments are, in the context of societies, carry either privilege or marginalization. They are a form of organizing or categorizing or sorting human beings, on the basis of constructs that may or may not have much validity, um, and which are pretty arbitrary in certain ways, but which hold very strong shapes in terms of access and what we've termed privilege, as well as marginalization. So in that layer of the model, in the layer of rank, of the meat of the apple, we have aspects of ageism, ableism, religious oppression, racialization, racism, classism, and economic injustice. um, aspects of heterosexism, homophobia, anti-Indigenous oppression, anti-immigrant oppression, and all forms of gender oppression. And so all of those aspects of being sorted by categories that are arbitrary and but which carry potency. Resmaa Menakem says that racism is the lie with teeth. So these categories in themselves are not difficult to unpack and find fault with as constructs, but they still have potency and they still carry implications for our lives. So part of what I'm working with is how in the core of ourselves, in the part of us that has choice and the ability to understand the world or read the world, as Paulo Freire suggested, we can make different kinds of responses to these assignments, many different kinds of responses, and we do over our lifetime. We know that young children by the age of 3 have the basic mechanics of how these categories work and how these categories will have implications for their lives. So, for example, young children can be asked, are you a boy or a girl? And they might answer according to their assignment. They might answer contrary to their assignment. They might say it depends. They might be more fluid than we are. But when you ask them, is it better to be a boy or a girl or something else? They reliably still say, well, it's better to be a boy. And of course, early childhood educators are horrified. Why are you saying that? We've tried so hard to counter gender bias in our environment. And the kids will say, well, it's better to be a boy because my dad gets to not do the dishes if he doesn't want to, right? So they are observing unevenness in society, and how they apply that to themselves varies. But over the course of our lifetime, we hope to have more and more opportunities to counter all the ways that people are dehumanized and through categories. And so those are the two first layers: the core, the power, the identity layer, and then the rank layer, the assignment and systemic and social dimension. And then there's another layer, the peel of the apple. And the peel of the apple I call status play. And this is because in theater, we work with the concept that you move a story by moving or by maneuvering the importance of each person on the stage at any given moment, who's speaking, who's responding. And so status play is the performance of interaction in our lives, how we posture, how we move in or out of engagement, moment to moment experiences. The reason that matters is that if we do an analysis that only looks at the surface, we can observe what we could call good behavior or bad behavior, kindness or disrespect. We could look at all these kind of things. But if we don't take into account the other two layers, we're leaving a big part of the story out. So if we look at behavior and we say, okay, we think that bullying is bad, agreed. We can understand that. But if we don't bring the social layer, the meat of the apple, the rank layer, we might not be able to see the nuance through which bullying reinforces social dynamics of privilege and marginalization. And then if we don't go deep enough, we might not be able to see how the bully, the one carrying out the bullying, is having experiences that are disorienting them, dysregulating them, such that they're behaving in this way, which also may line up with some script in the category of rank. So that's a way to sort of begin to get into the complexity of understanding status play, rank layer, assignments, and then the power of our identity. Now, all of this is encoded in the body. We're reactive in our bodies, we're socialized in our bodies, and we find freedom and choice and liberation in our bodies. And so all three layers have physiological dimensions. In Theater of the Oppressed, we work to give shape, strike a pose for some behavioral aspect. We might then add another body to the sculpture that looks at the social dimension, and then how we interact with the sculpt, how we animate that image begins to get into the question of liberation and the part of power.
Wow. I love the way that you just covered like such a deep and complex concept through the metaphor of the apple. Thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the shape of my own identity and the shape of my own power, and how that shape changes and has changed both over time from childhood to adulthood, like now, as a middle-aged woman, um, and how much kind of, for me and my work with emotions and emotional intelligence, how much feeling influences this shape, and a feeling of either powerlessness and the associated emotional signature of that, or powerfulness, and what are those different shapes feel like in the body, and what are the contexts under which those shapes change. But I love what you said about the peel and status play, and I think that that's a really powerful way to think about changing the shape of how powerful or powerless we might feel in any given moment, and empowering ourselves to change the shape through how we feel. And I'd love for us to for you to share a little bit more about how your work helps people change the shape of what they're feeling, how they're showing up, and specifically through a lens of power. So talk to me about, and a little bit more about, how your work, which centers on psychodrama and other embodied practices, um, what does an exercise look like when you work with a person or a group? Um, how do you help someone gain insight into power and privilege through changing the shape of what they're feeling and how they're relating to their sense of power?
I think the primary mechanism is um, not so much about changing as it is about fully experiencing something, fully experiencing something. So with my students, we work with this range of skill sets from, less um, less choice to maximum choice, less freedom to maximum freedom. Five skill sets for both our parts that are our assignments that carry privilege, and five for the assignments that carry marginalization. So there is a map of a kind of landscape that we recognize, but the goal is not to get to the edge or the end of that landscape, but to experience the particular moment and the particular location in that landscape as healthily as possible. So I was going to say, my students started saying, fill the skill, not shift the skill. And then after that, the kind of paradoxical, I don't know, chant is, fill the skill until it spills. So that the concept is that change comes not from inside. It can, but generally that's more rare. Otherwise, we'd just all read a book and be there, right? That change doesn't really occur from illumination as much as it does through reaching the fullness of the particular moment or location or experience or aspect of the landscape that we're in. So we talk about meeting people where they are, and sometimes there's a subtext like meet people where they are so they'll move, but really it's meet people where they are so they can fully expand into the most healthy version of whatever it is that they're experiencing. And that means that we have to kind of loosen our grip on a wish or a desire for change, or a wish or a desire for relief or solution. So a big part of the work in these embodied practices like psychodrama is to relax away from solving it and fixing it, and instead moving into the mystery and the exploration. In psychodrama, we have this idea that I think all creatives maybe share this. There is a first universe, a formless universe. And this is Jacob Moreno, the founder of psychodrama, offered this. There's a first universe with no form, and then there's a formed universe, a second universe that has shapes. Well, we're occupying, we have to, own that we have shape, and we are operating in a time-bound, linear, in, out, more, less, better, worse universe. But there's also available to us every moment a formlessness that all people know through their creative experience, and that is that something wants to come into being that isn't here yet in form. And that's what the word inspiration points to. That's what creativity is about. In psychodrama, the primary, I guess, vehicle is something called spontaneity. And it's defined as an adequate response to a new situation or a new response to an old situation or problem or challenge. So a new response to something that's been with you. You have a breakthrough. Sometimes in the mornings, I wake up and I know what I need to do. I know what I know what that workshop needs to look like, or I get the next line of the poem or something like that. So a new answer to something that has been there. Or I encounter a challenging or just new experience, such as today with a new setup for video, and I have to adapt. And can I meet that? And you got to see me struggle, like, this isn't the way that I normally do things, and I thought this is working. I can't see very well. It seems glitchy. I don't know if it's going to work. So I had to find my spontaneity, and part of my spontaneity was letting the cat do whatever the cat is going to do while I'm trying to work this out, because I could not manage both. Surely she's now perfectly restful in her hexagon right there. She's perfectly calm, communicating and offering me and my whole system the message that, you know what, it's fine. It's fine. We can do this thing. So spontaneity is rising to the occasion or having a breakthrough. And all of that is what's really at work and what's being cultivated, invited in psychodramatic work. So I'll give you an example. We use something called doubling technique. And the double, from Moreno's developmental theory, is the very first task of the primary caregiver for the baby. So the baby's crying. You're holding a baby, the baby's crying, and the baby can't tell you what's going on. So you can picture the mom saying, or the dad, whoever's caring for the baby in that moment, saying, are we hungry? Are we hungry right now? Did we get good sleeps? Are we all right? Do we need to move a little bit? Do we need a little song? And so there's this voice of saying we or I, to offer the tonality of joining, right? And so doubling technique involves a person called the protagonist being on the stage, and then another person called the double being kind of right behind them, kind of like that, right behind, close, not touching, but close, on whichever side the protagonist prefers. And then the double's work is to attune as much as possible somatically, and then offer fragments or brief sentences in the first person. So if the protagonist says, well, I really don't know what to do about this interview I have tomorrow. And then the double might say, I could just walk in and blow them all away with my brilliance. Of course, that makes the person in the front laugh a little. And maybe they say something like, maybe I'll just walk in and show them a little bit of my brilliance. So the person in the front, the protagonist, uses whatever the double offers. The double might try to be faithful. The double might try to be antagonistic. The double might try to be extreme and exaggerated. Most of the time, the double is simply trying to speak what the protagonist isn't yet able to say, and to bring that forward, not necessarily to show up, right? But definitely not to show up the protagonist as unconscious of something, but to offer something they can almost say, just as the caregiver of the baby might say, are we hungry? And sense into, yeah, that's it. You need a bottle or something like that. And so it's an assist, right? And that somatic echo is really amazing to watch, because it's very, very common that the protagonist will not only find that their double nailed it, like just, wow, that was just it. But not only that, they also felt the uplift of having that energetic joining with which they can say the thing they need to say. Maybe it's a boundary they need to set. Maybe it's a thing they need to claim. Maybe it's a clarity they've brought. Any kind of catharsis. We work with a variety of catharsis possibilities. And the double can really fuel that and offer that. In my work, we use some fairly specialized doubles. We use, for example, an ancestral double. And the ancestral double will take the role of an ancestor in that line and will intuit or offer something from the voice of the ancestor. We use a collective double, and that would be the protagonist might say, I need my support group, or my collective of my affinity group with me, and they'll choose someone to be their affinity double or their collective double. We use somatic doubles. And so there's all different kinds of ways. And this is just a very, very thin slice of what's available through psychodrama. That might be happening in the context of a larger scene, right? Where the protagonist might either ask for a double, or the director might offer them a double, or someone in the audience might say, I have a double. They feel something is happening on the stage. So director says, come on up. And the double comes up and attunes and then offers something that they saw from the audience. And either it's right, which is awesome, or it's wrong, which is also awesome. Because when the double offers something that's not right, the protagonist finds out what is right and speaks it. So there's also this no fault kind of field that spontaneity really loves to, spontaneity loves to offer herself into the field where there's nothing you can do wrong. Yeah, so that's a little bit of how psychodrama and embodiment might be seen.
Wow. I was hanging on your every word, and think it's so powerful, like this concept of, well, the first thing is just not fighting or struggling with, pardon the noise, by the way, there's construction going on outside my house.
It's all, we know now why it's here, because it fits with our topic, right? So we have, what is that called? That instrument that they're using, that tool that they're using. It's breaking the ground, right?
Yeah. I don't know why I'm spacing on it right now, but a digger.
Yeah. the thing that breaks
through concrete.
Right. So this is exactly the soundtrack for our
I'm noticing the shape of my resistance, and it's definitely making me slightly uncomfortable. But yeah, the first thing you said, which is just not fighting or resisting, but being with the shape of what is, and it reminded me of some moments I've had, especially in the past year, where I've been experiencing a lot of grief, and grief is one of those very full-bodied emotions that you can't really fight. And I think that there's just so much power in, I mean, in our society today, where it's so difficult. It's so difficult to confront the truth and the reality of what we're up against. And I think about how much energy we collectively spend avoiding confronting what we're feeling, right. through any type of distraction. Like, insert your flavor of distraction, whether it's a substance or media, or a behavior or an emotion that is addictive. Like, so much of us, I think, avoid feeling something. I know personally I've avoided feeling grief and loss, and I had a moment last year where I was listening to a very powerful song, actually, with an artist I had the privilege of meeting, and this song just created space, I think, for my grief to breathe. And I remember in that moment hearing the song and just allowing that feeling to exist, and feeling just my whole body kind of swell up. Like the shape was just expanding, which is not usually a shape I associate with grief. and then the release, right? The tears, or the emotional release, and what came afterwards. And I know this as an embodiment practitioner, what came afterwards was an immense sense of lightness and of joyfulness and levity and childlike wonder. And it reminds me of what's on the other side of these complex emotions that we so often avoid, is this immense opening for creativity. And what I really loved about what you just shared about the doubling is that there's an element of co-creation, you know, in a society where we're increasingly feeling lonely and feeling disconnected from each other, and we're increasingly communicating not in real life, like not in emotionally attuned ways. There's such a loss of opportunity for us to double with each other, you know, in the real world. And um, it seems like, especially in workplaces, there's a lot of threats and potential threats and competitiveness, and a feeling that we're not necessarily on the same team. Like, who can I trust? Who can I really trust? And this idea of doubling is so powerful, because sometimes all it takes is a small, tiny message from somebody else saying, I see you, I understand what you're going through, or here's just a little burst of energy to kind of keep you going. And that emotional attunement is something that's so necessary, because we can't really create in isolation or alone. And I've learned this like so deeply recently, where we really need each other if we want to create at the scale that we need to create that, and in response to these really heavy things that we're feeling. um so I love that, and I'd love to know a little bit more about how this concept of doubling, like when you work with people and you go through this process using psychodrama, and especially learning how to be open to inviting others in, and saying yes, that's it, or no, that's not it, but no, that's not it, but that helps me understand what is it. How does that process of playing in this space translate to the real world? Like when people leave your classes and they go back out into their organizations, into their workplaces, into their families, what are some of the feedback that you get about how these concepts translate into their lives?
Yeah, I'd love to share some of the things I've heard people say. Very similar in some ways to what you were just referring to. So one thing is the message, you know, tú eres mi otro yo. It's a Mayan concept. You are my other me, and I am your other you. So doubling, in a way, doubling is a practice of performing what is always happening. Because through mirror neurons, we are constantly transmitting to each other, resonating with each other. We know vibrational impact is constant. So we feel each other, and we are each other. It's just that rank layer, and sometimes the status play layer as well, disrupt that, like static or noise. So anytime that we can feel into, even a little bit, that we are not distinct and separate, even though we are individuals, we are also really not, and that all that is impacting anyone is impacting everyone. Um, that is part of what practicing doubling brings to people. And so I've had several folks say, you know, I was in a conflict situation, or I was in a meeting where I was dysregulated, or something was frustrating me. And I found myself imagining standing behind that person. And what might they be feeling that they can't speak in this space? What might be truly going on for them? How can I listen deeper to what they're saying? And one of the things that comes out of that, which I've heard in a variety of spaces, is this concept of behind every complaint is commitment. And so when we hear the complaint at any level, you know, from a family member, from a loved one, from someone from a political orientation very different from our own, when we hear the complaint, it's quite tricky to listen for the commitment. So I'm actually playing with the idea of working with a complaint to commitment double, and how that might be useful in settings like a meeting, you know, like a leadership meeting. I definitely use doubling a lot in my coaching as well. So it's something you can do with an individual too, is just offer in the first person. It sounds a little weird at first, but it might just say, well, if I'm going to speak as you, I am feeling frustrated. And then say it if it's true, if it feels right. If not, change it. So it's very invitational. It's not forceful. And that in itself, that way of bringing it in, carries out into the conversation the person has later with their adolescent. Um, I'm wondering if this is going on. Is this happening for you? And if not, there might be something else that feels more accurate. So classic, right? Are you feeling angry? I'm not angry. What I am is sick and tired of you doing X, Y, or Z. It still works. It still gives energy. And this is the thing, it's a generosity of energy. We're giving each other energy, but we can be more precise with energy that is supportive or invitational. And again, sending the message, how you are in this moment is how you are in this moment. I don't need you to be different. I don't
Mm.
need you to be different. What I need is to be with what's with you and see if I can attune to it so that I can be your other you and you can be my other me. Because especially if you're doing something I dislike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then chances are what's going on is a different psychological shape, which is projection. What's really irritating me in others is what I'm disowning in myself, right? That's classic, basic psychology 101.
Mm-hmm.
So, can I
Mm-hmm.
tune that in? And that, by the way, is not a double, that's an antagonist exercise. But just looking at who's bothering me and what is it about them that is a mirror. Not that everything is a mirror, because that's taking it too far. But what if I'm having a really strong reaction? Two or three things are possible. One, I'm noticing a call to action, something I need to do here. Or also, there might be something here that's informing what I'm not seeing in myself. So, what most of my trainees and students report is that they find a way to extend the metaphor of the stage to all of life, of the antagonist within to all the antagonists without. And the double is a shape that they can choose to take anytime that they want to bring in to perform, but I don't mean that in a sense of false, but rather because I'm a stage person, that bring into life, I guess, embody and bring into life
Mm.
how how the resonance is showing up. Of course, there's utilization for conflict. Yeah, and there's many other things that you said that I thought really reminded me of that idea. But mainly, we are doubling for each other unconsciously. Can we do it more consciously?
Mm. Ah, your wisdom is just so deep and profound. And as you're talking, I feel really, really grateful to hear you speak and share this. And as you're speaking, one of the things that's coming up for me is um, noticing my own, like the example that came up for me, which is really about the most difficult uh, attunement and situation that I struggle with it and have struggled with, and that lives in kind of my family history and as well as my professional history, is this scenario and situation of an aggressive man. And I think that a lot of women in the workplace, and even a lot of, men as well, who perhaps are not aggressive, struggle with this kind of archetype of the aggressive man, somebody who is, clearly in pain or suffering, but regardless has a manifestation of aggressive, of needing to get their way and needing to maintain control and using aggression or anger in order to maintain that. And I'd love to, we're living through a time right now in 2025 where gender in particular has become a really contentious point, a really divisive point in terms of people don't necessarily agree on how gender dynamics show up in the workplace. And I think that this archetype of how aggression is used, not even just by men, but also by women as well, and how, patriarchy has kind of connected, and these concepts of aggression with power, and how if we want to be powerful, then we kind of have to use aggression in order to gain power. I'd love to get your perspective on this dynamic, and on gender dynamics perhaps more broadly. What are the shapes and ideas and concepts that come up for you as you work with people on how to work with aggression, how to soften it, how to not not meet that dynamic through projecting or through falling into perhaps a pattern, but how to disrupt that in a way that is useful and effective in today's context.
Yeah, and again, I'm just noticing the soundtrack is so perfect for the conversation. Um, the forceful breaking through. I mean, there are times, right, when that exactly is the machine you need for whatever task as is happening outside on your street. Um, but most of us either have an experience of being overpowered by our own anger and rage and the patterns and shapes that go with that, the chemicals that go with that, or we have disowned it, and have trouble even accessing anger and go right to hurt and fear. So right relationship, if there's such a thing, with the emotional multiple flavors, is something that I think these embodied practices and music, and working in visual art, provide us a great pathway for incorporating and integrating these things that have been either disowned, and so they're coming out sideways or imploding into the body, or otherwise disowned and they are running roughshod over the person and maybe others in their life. um, Emotion is neutral, it's not good or bad, and also it's energy, it's fuel. Grief, sadness, anger, joy, they pass through us as you were describing. They move through us and they animate us, right? They give the texture and flavor and vitality to our experience. And I come from Central Mexico. I'm from Puebla, and while I don't think anybody would say that Pueblans are particularly expressive Mexicans comparatively to living in the Pacific Northwest, I come from a more expressive culture, and I was taught growing up that you can be and often are sad, angry, happy, uh, terrified at the same time. This is just the soup we're in. I mean, emotion is it's just motion with an E in front of it. It's just the flow of life is what emotion is. So there's not really a thing about categorizing them as good or bad. It's just what is the wave that I'm riding, and what are all the different kinds of textures of water in that wave. um, we get into trouble when what we suppress or constrict, right? It's kind of like when they teach you to fall. I don't know if you've ever had that, but someone tried to teach me how to fall well so as not to hurt myself. um, Similar with this, it's like how we ride the wave of emotion is part of what we're practicing in these embodied contexts. And then the other layer to that is that if emotion is the motion of life, then motion for towards what? And I would say it's towards development. That emotion is the fuel of growth and development, individually, collectively. And so we can make friends with that. We can connect to that as that which is nourishing our pathway, our growthful pathway. Particularly anxiety, even more so than any other emotion. The experience of disequilibrium, the feeling of steadiness, that maybe that person that you were thinking about is experiencing when they're dysregulated, and it's showing up as anger, rage, control, or someone who's crying, or someone who's trembling. These are this is part of what growth looks like. So as you look at that person who's angry, in addition to everything you said, which I thought was quite correct, they're suffering. They may also be breaking through, though. There may be something active happening for them that if, and this is a big if met well, if companioned well, could yield some filling of the skill or fullness. You said powerfulness. I loved your emphasis on the word full, powerfulness. So whether it's life fullness, vitality, expressiveness, or a sense of true power, emotions are important ingredients for all of that. So we want to be friends with them any way we can. And we know from conflict management and conflict resolution skills, particularly restorative justice, that it isn't really about softening. It's about letting the anger flow without violence, and it will flow well when it's heard well. Even if we can't make sense in terms of our own values with why someone is angry, we probably can understand it if we think of it as an experience, right? If someone says, I'm thinking about children again, and you're at a birthday party and you're cutting the cake. I love being a cake cutter. It's one of my favorite things. So I try to give everybody the piece they want, the size they want, right? So I cut a slice. Is this what you want? Is this the right size? But then you give it to the two kids and they're holding their pieces and they thought they were the same size. But then one of them says, well, that one's bigger, right? That one's bigger. That doesn't, that's not fair. Now I know they're not bigger because I was very careful, right? So they have the same size. So if I trade it over, now the other kid says, but wait, that's not fair. And they might escalate. So they don't have to have an accurate perception to have an authentic feeling. If we insist that people's feelings have to make sense, we're going to wait a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Can we grant credibility? Can we say the way you're feeling is the way you're feeling without saying the way you're feeling is based on accurate, objective truth? Because the way I'm feeling is not based on accurate truth. I don't know everything, right? How I feel is how I feel. It's how I feel.
Wow. That's really powerful. I'm thinking about just truth being more nebulous of a concept than ever, and having compassion for what people are feeling when their truth is completely different from my truth. And
Yep.
I think that's
Which
especially
maybe all of the time. I mean, maybe we imagine more shared reality than we actually have, but we imagine that under our particular lens that says, oh, these are the ones that agree with me, these are the ones that don't agree with me. But even the ones that agree with me might be actually there might be some significant difference between our perceptions and our realities. But the feelings I trust, that I trust. The thoughts, that's a whole other conversation.
I could chat with you all day, Dr. Nieto. But unfortunately we're approaching time or past time, but it's been such a beautiful and enlightening conversation. So thank you for sharing a taste of your wisdom with our audience and myself today. As we wrap up, I'd love to ask you a couple more short questions. So if a leader watching this episode wanted to start integrating these ideas today, what's one embodied practice they could try?
Making any sound, literally any sound together. Asking a question that takes someone to a scene of resource. So for example, starting a meeting with, when did you feel most yourself yesterday? And then take us through the scene. Another one that's I think relatively easy is to ask, to speak from the voice of something or someone else. If I could speak from the voice of Simone the cat above my head, I would say this conversation was pretty heady for being about the body, but that's all right. That's all right. Because you're never without a body. I'm thinking about how I would give I taught graduate students in counseling for over 30 years, and I would often give them dance therapy articles to read. And they would say, well, I'm not planning to be a dance therapist. Why are you making me read dance therapy articles? And I would say, it's all dance therapy. It's all dance therapy. Unless you found a way to take your head and send it into the room without the rest of your body, it's all dance therapy. And everyone needs to be trained in dance therapy, even if they're going to sit in a little box or in a chair. So yeah, my cat always says that to me. It's like, you do realize every single thing you do is an embodied practice, right? Like, there's no such thing as not being embodied. That's the illusion, is that we're not embodied ever. We're always in a body, and we're always a body. Even that phrase I said is incorrect. In a body, where would I be? I mean, I am my body.
Yes.
So any reminder of that, how are you? How are you as a body question? Where do you sense that? I have an opinion about this policy that we're discussing. What part of your body is most clear about that? Oh, my left shoulder. What does that one want to say? So things like that, I think, are relatively easy. But, psychodrama does require 800 hours of training and 2 big exams. And so if anyone's really interested, I highly recommend going to psychodramacertification.org, I think. And certainly get in touch with me if you're interested in learning more.
I love that. I know that you have some courses and trainings coming up as well, and so I'd love to let people know, for you to let people know about those. So what do you have coming up? How can people learn more about your work and how to work with you, connect with you?
I'll share into the comments maybe once you post this how to get on my mailing list, but I offer quite a few workshops through the teledrama .org or .com. I never remember which one it is. So you can easily find my offerings there. I'm collaborating with Miriam Zachariah on a pretty deep psychodramatic encounter project workshop that will be about really examining conflict through psychodrama. It's called Rupture and Repair. And I'm also working on a thing called Do We Make the Road by Walking, which is about life and path. Not exactly a career seeking, but more like understanding your path inside of your work and life. And that's going to be a poetry focused poetry and psychodrama endeavor. I feel like I'm forgetting something else that I'm doing. But I also work with Be Possible, which is an organization that supports leaders. And we're going to be offering a liberating strategies series focusing on appreciative inquiry and psychodrama. So yeah, various things coming up. I'm doing a thing with Martha Hurwitz called Playing for Liberation, where we're going to look at playfulness and practices of play in activism for these particular times. I'm sure I'm forgetting some things, but yeah, it's all connected. The American Society for Group Psychotherapy and Psychodrama has a society session coming up soon, a day-long symposium, and then the national conference is in Albuquerque this year in the beginning of April. Love to see people there if you're interested. There you go. That's all the plugs I can think of.
I love it. I love it. And we'll share me. I have your link for your mailing list, so I'd be happy to share that. But if you share any more links with me, I can drop them in the comments as well. Happy to do that. And yeah, I'd love for us to make some sounds together as we close. So
sure. I don't know. These mechanisms are not great for singing together, but we can certainly try. Is there a song you'd like to bring, or would you like me to bring one?
I'd love for you to bring one, and I'll play off of it.
Okay, how about this? Would you be willing to do an echo? So I sing a line and you sing a line?
Yes, I'd love
And
to.
this is a Peace Poets song that really sustains me. And I learned it from Lou Aya. I highly recommend checking out the Peace Poets. And it goes like this. This is the moment.
This is the moment.
Put down what you're holding.
Put down what you're holding.
Everything is changing.
Everything is changing.
Listen to the wind.
Listen to the wind.
And when you hear it,
And when you hear it,
you don't have to fear it.
you don't have to fear it.
Now's the time for healing.
Now's the time for healing.
Everything you love.
Everything you love.
That's it.
Beautiful. Dr. Nieto, thank you so, so much for gracing us with your presence today. Really appreciate your time and energy. And for our audience that tuned in, thank you so much for joining us. Hope that you enjoyed today's show. We will be back probably 2 weeks from today. Next week, we're skipping a week, but we'll be back 2 weeks from today with Cheryl Kababa, author of Closing the Loop, an incredible systems thinker, design researcher, and someone who has deeply inspired me. And so tune in 2 weeks from today to hear that incredible conversation. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Keep lightening the way. Thank you for tuning in.